some of the specific secretariat officials of APEC, we are having a noodle bowl, in his word, 150 bilateral and trilateral, multilateral trade agreements already among the APEC countries. People are confused. Is the system really being rightly streamlined? Do you think it can be?
Yes, I remain optimistic. APEC was set up 20 plus years ago in order to bring about a free trade area of the Asia Pacific, and progress has been very slow. So a lot of countries have gone off on bilateral deals or regional agreements. The Trans-Pacific Partnership involves 12 countries. I think some countries have gotten frustrated with the lack of progress and they're moving ahead. I think that's a positive development because then that puts pressure on the whole group. You know, let's really get going with the free trade area of the Asia Pacific that involves everyone. That would have enormous benefits all around. So I think these bilateral and regional steps are going to push us in the direction of a big free trade area, which would be very positive.
Can TPP push us further into an urgency of establishing free trade area, Asia Pacific? Mr. Ye.
I won't be so optimistic to see the TPP will make a huge contribution to the regional integrity. You know, just you mentioned that there is an Asian noodle bowl, but if you're working in the kitchen,
love
you
noodle,
will know.
but this is very chaotic at the moment.
If you stay in the kitchen, you will know. You can put more noodles into the bowl, but it won't be automatically turned into a plate of the salad. So still, it will be a noodle. It's with a lot of the bilateral, trilateral, multilateral free trade arrangement. But unless you're working on the whole picture of the FTA in the Asia and the Pacific, otherwise only focusing on a small scale of the free trade arrangement won't automatically making the whole regional free FTA.
Would you say TPP is small because you've
it's
got
only
the
12,
largest economy in the United States? And
yeah,
the
we can say
largest
that it's
economy in
only
Japan?
12 countries, and if you exclude Japan, the USA, the rest of the 10, they are not measured by the trade values. They don't count much.
Well, we are having some of those also with us from Singapore. Mr.
Yeah,
Tan,
of course.
Join us for this debate. What do you see here? Chaos or actually some possibility to streamline it?
Well, I think, you know, given the fact that the Doha round talks at the WTO level is not making much progress, you know, it's no surprise, you know, that countries are getting into all these different types of deals, whether bilateral or multilateral. And so certainly I think, you know, at one level it will certainly push countries to try to move onto the free trade area bandwagon. But I think that also then pushes us further away from trying to get a global deal. So I think this is a challenge, you know, but I suppose, you know, one should be optimistic, you know, that there would be some momentum generated. But I think, you know, where TPP is concerned, you know, with the exclusion of China at this point in time, I think, you know, there will be that competition of wills, you know, to see, you know, the US and China trying to push, you know, for their own free trade area agreements. So it will be interesting days ahead, you know, but I think certainly all countries recognize that they need to press on.
FTAAP, abbreviation for Free Trade Agreement of the Asia Pacific.
Yeah, sure.
Chinese President Xi Jinping, during his talk now in APEC, talking about the acceleration of that. But the question is how? Yeah. Isn't that the most important thing? So how do you think, and in that regard, what role can China play? How much contribution can China make in the speeding up of the process, or so-called acceleration, as the Chinese president himself said it, for the establishment of the FTAAP?
Actually, at least China can do make the two contributions to the FATTP. Firstly, China can make the progress on more progress on the multilateral dialogue. You know, China used to prefer the bilateral FTA arrangement, for instance, China and Korea, China and ASEAN. But now it's time for China to take the more positive attitude towards the multilateral framework.
What is the game changer that would make China to do that?
Because just as I mentioned, only the bilateral FTA, you can imagine in the Asia and the Pacific, all the countries have the bilateral FTA with another country doesn't mean you have the FTA in the whole region.
That's right.
So this time, we have a lot of the FTA arrangement, bilateral, multilateral, but now we have a general picture. And secondly, China can make the contribution on the infrastructure connection. We can talk about a lot of on FTA arrangement, but if the infrastructure connection isn't there, there's still not very convenient for the products
That
or
will
the
be
goods
empty talk,
transfer.
in fact. So, Mr. Dollar, what about the United States? I mean, of course, China and the U.S. In the Asia-Pacific region are important countries. How much can the U.S. contribute, from what extent, to the FTAAP, particularly now with the TPP still exclude most of the other members of the APEC at the moment, at least?
Well, the United States is enthusiastic about negotiating deeper integration with all of the Asia-Pacific economies. We're moving ahead with TPP because we were frustrated that things weren't moving fast enough. I think TPP has already had a good stimulus effect. We need to recognize that these economies are of different size. The US and China are by far the biggest economies. So US and China reaching some agreement on how to move ahead with integration is very important. One practical step is this bilateral investment treaty between China and the US. It was very nice in your opening clip to hear President Xi Jinping talk about China continuing to open up to foreign investment, moving to a negative list system. If the US and China can negotiate opening up of investment, then that sets the stage for the whole Asia-Pacific region to agree on one of the most important issues, which is opening up to investment. In a lot of sectors, you cannot really trade effectively if you can't invest.
Right.
So for the United States, this investment issue is really very, very important.
Yeah, Mr. Dollar, well said. But, I'm confused now because every time when I asked about one trade pact, yet people talk about if the other one is finished, then this one can be done. But in fact, they're all interlinked. When asked of FTAAP, people say maybe TPP could help. When people ask, when is TPP going to be a regional and global one, people will say maybe BIT, bilateral investment treaty among countries, that could help. So I'm really confused. Are we kicking our balls further down to others' courts so that, in fact, we could excuse ourselves with some of the immediate actions and promises we can make? Mr. Dollar?
I think there definitely are risks. As Professor Tan said, the whole WTO process is not working very well. There's too many countries and everyone has a veto. Asia Pacific also has a huge number of countries. We just have not made progress negotiating a really important, deep integration among the Asia Pacific countries. So it's a little bit risky to go with these bilateral deals and regional agreement like TPP, but I think it's the best practical way to move forward. And if the US and China could make more progress on our mutual opening, then everyone else is going to want to be involved in negotiating some big Asia-Pacific agreement. That would be the really positive scenario.
I'm going to go to our Singaporean guest a little bit later, but for now, let me come back to you, Mr. Ye, since we heard Mr. Dollar talk about BIT, bilateral investment treaty between US and China. As far as I understand, it's going to be very difficult and challenging because the negative list provided by both sides seem to not necessarily see eye to eye with one another. And people are talking about political seasons also inside the United States, campaigns mainly for elections. So things might not happen that fast. If Mr. Dollar do not agree with me, do correct me. But for you, Mr. Ye, what do you think about the link between China and the United States coming to certain consensus? Well, that could lead to further exploration of the FTAAP or even discussion about the TPP in the future for the Asia-Pacific region.
Firstly, I don't think we need to make the TTP as the precondition for the China and the U.S. economic cooperation. Whether we said it's only the TTP is open for China, it will means only this. It means that China and the U.S. will cooperate on the economic cooperation in the regional level. I don't think so.
What exactly is it from you?
I think the most important is that China and the U.S. show they have the intention to open to another side and then set up the model for the rest of the economy communities in this region.
Explain, quote unquote, intention. What does that mean? What kind of actions and words would it mean to you intentions.
The BRIT is a good sign, but it's not enough. But although we should recognize for the so huge economic community, so to reach a certain level of the cooperation is a very, even the symbolic level, that's still very important.
Okay, Mr. Tan, we've been letting you wait a little bit because it's very important for you to come in now. What do you make of, first of all, TPP current stage? Some suggest it could run into the possibility of a rich countries club. At this moment, very few developing economies in it so far. Could that be? Secondly, what do you think about the US-China discussion that's going on right now for the future of FTA-AP regional free trade agreement for the Asia-Pacific region from Singapore's perspective, of course?
Yeah. Well, I think certainly TPP needs to broaden beyond the 12 countries. But I think the US-led TPP has gotten off to a good start, at least where the Americans are concerned, because you have countries like Singapore on board, many free trade proponents on board. So I think that gives the TPP that push. But I think ultimately you need to bring China on board, and I think this is where it becomes important, right? Because in the end, trade has to be inclusive, and that's the only way that we can generate more growth. I think it's a question now of countries trying to put aside their national interests, but of course we must be alive to the reality that free trade area agreements are also pretty much political agreements in nature. So if we talk about noodle soup or alphabet soup, I mean one could throw in RCEP as well. So there are many things on the table, and so the question is, are these duplicating, efforts? Are we getting in the way? Are countries getting in the way of, trying to promote, wholesome economic growth and development? And particularly, as has been mentioned, investments are important. So we need to move a lot more resolutely and be more inclusive.